And now we come to our speaker portion of the meeting here, the workshop. And today I'd like to introduce Matt M.
Hi friends, my name is Matt. I'm an addict, and I'm a proud member of the Faith and Life group in Canada. So today I've been asked to share about my experience in recovery as far as change and loss and grieving goes. So I'm going to try and do that. I don't have a long drug-a-log. I picked up at 12, and my first using at 12, and my last time was at 24. You know, in between, I destroyed my life. I destroyed the life of people around me. I was, spiritually bankrupt, financially bankrupt, everything. It took everything from me. I pushed my family away. I pushed my friends away. I was unemployable, the whole bit. I mean, we all know the story, right? And at the age of 24, I found these rooms, and I've been clean ever since. Thank you. When I got here, I didn't handle change well. I don't know about anyone else, but I didn't. I didn't cope well. I didn't handle change well. I didn't handle relationships. I didn't. I remember, and talking about grieving, being when I was 16 years old, and the lady who lived across the street from me passed away. And she was sort of like a second mom to me. I hung out with her kids and was there for lunch and all that stuff. And I remember going to her funeral and crying, and I'm brought up that men don't cry, and I was really ashamed of that. And I said to myself at that moment, I said, I'm never going to cry again, and that sort of became the mantra for me. I wouldn't go to funerals anymore, and I avoided it, at all costs. And I think I was 7 years clean before I shed a tear again. It was that strong. But I couldn't know how to handle it, so I just avoided it. And I mean, that's the story of my drug use, was just avoidance. I wanted to numb the pain and not feel. So anyhow, in 1988, I got clean. Went to meetings. I went to meetings daily. Probably the first 3 years. And that's where it worked for me, and that hour and a half every day I felt comfortable, I lived at home at first, got my own place, the small changes, right? We all go through them. And at 3 years clean, I joined the military, out of boredom as much as anything. I just wanted some excitement in my life, and, living in a small town wasn't doing it for me, I guess. So that was the first big change, outside of getting clean. And it was a great decision for me, as far as, life goes. But there was a lot of changes. 2 years later, I found myself in the Balkans on deployment, not able to get to meetings. And I didn't really handle that very well. It was interesting in that when they told me I was going, I thought, this is my thinking. I don't know, I wasn't really all there, but as an addict, I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to go to meetings, so I better wean myself off them. That didn't work very well. I found myself in the Balkans, not been to a meeting in 6 months, and walking around with an automatic weapon and thinking about killing myself, stuff. So, and that's at 6 years clean. So I had to find a new solution, to deal with some change. And when I got back, I got a new sponsor, went through the steps again, and started doing it again, living it, and that's what my first sponsor taught me. Was he says, when you move 90 meetings in 90 days, get a sponsor, get into service, all that stuff, and that's saved my life ever since. Every time I've had to move 90 meetings in 90 days, get a sponsor, do service, and I'm still clean today. So anyhow, about, I guess just my father was at my 10-year celebration, and he was diagnosed with cancer just before that. So a year later, he passed away. that point, I'd left the military and I'd moved back. I'd moved to Ottawa here, and it was closer to home. So that was really my first time in recovery, dealing with some serious, grieving, and it was a very dark time. I remember just going to meetings, and going to meetings for me is like autopilot. I just do it. And when there's stuff going on in my life, I do it more. Because my sponsor told me at one point, he says, balance is, getting to enough meetings that I can handle life on life terms, right? And sometimes I need more than one, sometimes I need more than 7 a week. But so when after my father passed away, and I'm learning to deal with that and going through the grieving process, and I'm going to meetings and I'm talking about it, and I found myself about it was probably 6 months later, and I was going through the motions of life, working, but just unhappy, dark and depressed and all that stuff, and I sort of this thought came into my head that I'm choosing to be this way. I have a choice in this, and I can get up and I can live, and I miss my dad, but if I can live in his legacy, then I can go on and do that, And so that was that first realization that, there was something that was under my control, we all have to go through the grieving process, but I think the length of time we stay in it is really up to us, So I set about just trying to get back to living life a day at a time, and, moving forward. And my girlfriend at the time, she went on to become my wife. We'd been sort of postponing our wedding for while my father was sick. So about a year after that, we got married, and again, another change, right? There's an adjustment, and that was all good. And I just like everything else I've learned to do is, I talk to my friends in these rooms, and I go to meetings, and try and live life by on life's terms, and practice the principles. Probably, I'm going to jump ahead now. I went through, that was in 2001, I got married. So we went through the, marriage. I worked, came home, we traveled. We decided we weren't going to have children, and that was fine. We were both comfortable with that. And just went about living, right? And I remember, and it was kind of a big deal because the mortgage on our house was paid off in Christmas of 2010. And I thought, oh, great. Now, we can travel, we can do all this stuff. We got, extra money. And on April the 4th in 2011, my wife was diagnosed with brain cancer, and it's just devastating, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to go through it, alone, and I'm not the guy that's, always out there reaching out for help, I tend to work my way through it, and then I'll share about it, talk to my sponsor and whatnot. But, I was never one to really reaching out for help all the time, but when this happened, I knew I wasn't getting through this alone, so what I did, I came to the meetings and I talked to you people, and I shared about it. I shared about, what was happening in my life and what we were going through, and my wife, Shirley, was a very big part of this fellowship. She wasn't in it, but she was friends with a lot of people. And it just, the fellowship stepped forward, and I found out who was my friends and who I was important to and who we were important to. And we just walked through it. And that probably a year and a half, I just kept going to meetings and sharing about it and crying about it and sharing about it and sharing about it. And it's to the point where I thought I was sharing too much about it, that you guys were probably sick of it, And that's me, because no one ever stepped forward and said, we're sick of hearing about that. Nobody ever said that. So, it's just in my head. I was just looking for an excuse not to share about it, right? So anyhow, that's kind of what went on there. About 3 months into her treatment, my mom was put in the hospital, and it was a minor thing, but she never came out. 6 weeks later, we buried her, and again, I had some, when my mom went in the hospital, it was, I mean, I'm not trying to be cryptic here, but there was some thoughts that went through my head thinking, there was a relief there because it was a distraction from what I was going through with my wife and what she was going through. And, it was something I could sort of focus on to sort of get my mind off what was happening with my wife, and I have some feelings about that, some guilt and that today, which I have to deal with. And, but anyhow, 6 weeks after she went in, she passed away, and I'm trying to deal with her estate and my wife and her treatments, and it was quite a trying time, and again, I'm sharing at meetings. I've picked up extra meetings. I'm, doing whatever I need to do to look after me so that I can be there to look after, my wife. And we just walked through it. We walked through it with the help of you people. People stepped up. People were picking my wife up, taking her for treatments, and I was able to go to work, and and I mean, as smooth as it could have been in what we were going through, it was, and thanks to you people, and all I had to do was, put it out there that this is what we're going through, which was it was just amazing, freeing. So that's what I did. And I remember when we were going through this, and the first time when she went in the hospital, she had to have surgery, brain surgery, and I'd come home. I'd go into the hospital early in the morning, and I'd come home late at night, and there'd be 18 messages on the answering machine, and everybody wants updates. And I thought, oh my God, this maybe doing updates and calling people for 3 hours a night, right? So I started this little thing. I would send an email, a daily update on email, and it started with what it was, 18 or 20 people. And what this did for me, it allowed me a period where I could sort of go through and put down on paper what happened in my day, and I could share it, and what the result of that was, which was totally unexpected. I'd get up the next morning, I'd turn my computer on, and there'd be 20 messages back, and people then, they're just lifting me up, I'm getting hope, I'm getting faith, I'm getting love, and it was just giving me the strength to go one more day, and this list started at 20, and by the time my wife had passed away, it was probably 250 people. So I'd get up and there'd be 100 messages, and I'd go through them before I went to the hospital, and and that was giving me the strength just to move forward and stay on the path, on course. So anyhow, my mother passed away in August of 2011, and then a year later, my wife passed away in September 2012, and I mean, I was devastated, but I knew, I had to go on, I wasn't giving up, she wouldn't have wanted me to do that, and I mean, at the time I'd picked up an extra meeting, so I was going to, extra meetings and, doing whatever I could. I remember her cancer returned in August of 2012, and she was hospitalized again and more surgery, and 3 weeks later she passed away, and that whole 3 weeks was just, she's in the hospital again, I'm going in the morning and going home at night, and every day there's 30 people coming through, NA friends from outside the program, just, so it was almost like a wake for 3 weeks, and I mean, I'm so glad today that was, I just can't imagine being sitting in a hospital room with someone, watching them die and being alone, So, at least I was surrounded by friends and I was loved, and, again, all I had to do was put it out there, put it out to the universe, to this fellowship, and I was taken care of, right? You guys walked me through it, carried me. But when that was over, I was just exhausted, and after the funeral, it was up in my hometown in Renfrew, and I was staying at my friend's house, my sponsors, and we went through the whole funeral and all that stuff, and I went out and I hid at his house for a couple of days, and then I left town. My sister was getting married 2 weeks later in Las Vegas, so I took off and I went to Las Vegas for 3 weeks to her wedding. And, and again, like when my father died, and, I was numb. I was exhausted, I was numb, it was very depressed and dark. And I remember thinking that all I wanted to do was sleep. I was trying to close off my mom's estate and now my wife's estate and all that stuff. And the legalities were just overwhelming. And I'm not saying they were overwhelming because there was a lot to do. It was just, I didn't want to do it. As part of the grieving process, all I wanted to do was have fun. Go out and be happy as I could and laugh and whatever, right? And I couldn't do a lot of that, but I had very little energy to do, paying bills was a problem. The responsible things it was a big problem for me. And I had to really focus on that, and I learned to make lists and all that stuff. But, eventually, enough meetings, talking to people, and, reaching out, and, eventually I was able to sort of get back on track, and I remember I started dating probably 2 months after my wife passed away. And the only reason I did that was because if I wasn't doing that, I was going to be at home alone, sleeping or depressed or whatever, just isolating, right? And what dating did for me was it gave me an excuse to get up and get dressed and get out, something that, made me happy. And, I was in no place to carry on a relationship by any means, but it got me out, and it got me out of the house, got me back to sort of living, and I mean, that was important. So, and it's just over the time it's gotten better. That was 2.5 years ago, I guess. Things have gotten a little easier. I went back to work after about, 2 months, and I was totally useless. I was like, squirrel. I couldn't focus, right? I was there, I sort of knew what I was doing, but I couldn't focus, so I'd have 5 different projects on to go at the same time, and none of them ever finishing, and, but again, that got better. It got better slowly over time, and, working at it, and, the help of others, and, and I think if there's anything that I've learned from that, is that grieving is just a process. We all have to go through it. It was important for me, and what I learned with my father was at some point I had to make that decision that, I'm feeling the way I'm feeling because I'm choosing to, right? It becomes a habit. I think depression can sometimes become a habit, and I'm not making any light of, depression. I'm just coming from, losing people that we love, and for me, losing people that I love, and where I went with that, that depression. And there's things I can do. I can come to these meetings, I can share about it. There's, talk to my friends, just get up and do stuff, right? What I have learned is, talking about the change and stuff, is that I didn't do change very well, And today I'm trying to do change, Today I'm trying to stick my neck out and do stuff that's uncomfortable, just because I conquer stuff. I was down on a holiday in Las Vegas about a month ago or whatever, right? So I thought, well, why not? I might as well date down here. So I went out on a couple of dates down there, and I mean, I knew they weren't going anywhere, but it was a chance to get out and whatever, have lunch with a beautiful woman, sort of thing. And so I did, and that's something that I would never have done in the past, right? It was like, I'd put it off until I got home or whatever. So, that's the sort of thing. It's just, I'm trying today to live my life, just for today and one day at a time, and not put off life until later. I'm not going to wait until I retire. I'm not going to wait until, I'm 65, I'm going to try and live it today. And, it's that I feel much better about me when I do that, and I think I'm a lot happier about life, and, so anyhow, I don't have a lot more to share. I mean, recovery has been a process. It's been about change. I remember in early recovery, we talk about, reservations, and I always thought if there was something that was going to make me use again, It'd be like losing my parents, you know. And now I know that that didn't happen, you know. I made it through that. I walked through that, and I was a part of the solution, you know. And in my brain now, it's like there's nothing that can make me use unless I choose to pick up, right? You know, I was able to get through losing my parents, and I was able to get through losing my wife, and, you know, so there's nothing that's going to make me use, you know, as long as I don't choose to, you know. So anyhow, thank you for letting me share. It's been a, you know, great way to start the day, and have a great convention.
Thank you, Matt. I think what Matt said up here is a good example, a great example of what recovery and this program of Narcotics Anonymous can offer us if we're willing to look for it, if we're willing to ask for it, and also willing to accept it. Thanks again. And it says here, please join us in a circle to close this meeting with the Wee version of the Serenity Prayer. It also says that the theme song will play during this, so I don't know how that's going to happen. And now we come to our speaker portion of the meeting here, of the workshop. And today I'd like to introduce Matt M.
Hi friends, my name's Matt. I'm an addict, and I'm a proud member of the Faith and Life group in Canada. So today I've been asked to share about my experience in recovery as far as change and loss and grieving goes. So I'm going to try and do that. I don't have a long drugalogue. I picked up at 12, and my first using at 12, and my last time was at 24. You know, in between, I destroyed my life. I destroyed the life of people around me. I was, you know, spiritually bankrupt, financially bankrupt, you know, everything. It took everything from me. You know, I pushed my family away. I pushed my friends away. I was unemployable, the whole bit. I mean, we all know the story, right? And at the age of 24, I found these rooms, you know, and I've been clean ever since. You know, thank you. When I got here, I didn't handle change well. I don't know about anyone else, but I didn't. You know, I didn't cope well. I didn't handle change well. I didn't handle relationships. I didn't. You know, I remember, and you know, talking about grieving, being when I was 16 years old, and the lady who lived across the street from me passed away. And she was sort of like a second mom to me. I hung out with her kids and was there for lunch and all that stuff. So, and I remember going to her funeral and crying, you know. And I'm brought up that men don't cry, and I was really ashamed of that. And I said to myself at that moment, I said, I'm never going to cry again, you know. And that sort of became the mantra for me, you know. I wouldn't go to funerals anymore, and you know, and I avoided it, you know, at all costs. And I think I was 7 years clean before I shed a tear again. You know, it was that strong. You know, but I couldn't know how to handle it, so I just avoided it. You know, and I mean that's the story of my drug use, was just avoidance. You know, I wanted to numb the pain and, you know, not feel. So anyhow, in 1988 I got clean. Went to meetings. I went to meetings daily. You know, probably the first 3 years. And that's where it worked for me, you know. I mean, in that hour and a half every day, I felt comfortable, you know. I lived at home at first, got my own place, you know, the small changes, right? We all go through them. And at 3 years clean, I joined the military, you know, out of boredom as much as anything. You know, I just wanted some excitement in my life, and you know, living in a small town wasn't doing it for me, I guess. So so that was the first big change, you know, outside of getting clean. And it was a great decision for me, you know, as far as you know, life goes. But there was a lot of changes. 2 years later, I found myself in the Balkans on deployment, you know, not able to get to meetings, and I didn't really handle that very well. You know, I mean, it was interesting in that when they told me I was going, I thought, you know, this is my thinking. I don't know, I wasn't really all there, but as an addict, I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to go to meetings, so I better wean myself off them. You know, that didn't work very well. You know, I found myself in the Balkans, you know, not been to a meeting in 6 months, and walking around with an automatic weapon and thinking about killing myself, stuff, you know. So, and that's at 6 years clean. So, so I had to find a new